So, hi everyone. My name is Marinu Gauthier. I'm the head of customer success here at Meetup, at Meetup Pro. I'm so excited to have you all join us today to celebrate Financial Literacy Month. We're joined by Bola Sokunbi. She's the founder of Clever Girl Finance, and she's going to teach you the basics of minimizing debt, saving, retirement planning, and much more. You'll learn to set achievable goals so you have the confidence to master your finances and worry less about paying bills. Before we get to it, I'd love to share a few event guidelines to just make sure that everyone has a smooth experience. So first, note that this event is recorded, but you will not appear on the video. And we also muted you to make sure that we can hear the speaker properly. However, we do want to hear from you, and we definitely want to hear the questions that you have for Bola. So please use the Q&A feature that is at the bottom of your screen to submit all your questions. We're going to have some time at the end of the event to cover them. And also just want to mention that we have closed captioning available, and you should be able to see it by clicking on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preference. All right, so the agenda for today, first, we're going to do a quick introduction about our speaker. We're going to get into the fireside chat. And finally, we'll have some time at the end. We're going to keep at least 15 minutes to go over your questions. And without further ado, let me introduce you to Bola Sokunbi. So Bola is a certified financial education instructor. He's a finance expert, a best-selling author, a speaker, and a founder of Clever Girl Finance. Clever Girl Finance is a financial educational platform, and it's also a community for women, empowering them to achieve financial wellness and live their life on their own terms. I love that. She's also the recipient of the 2021 Financial Education Instructor of the Year Award from the National Council of Financial Educators. Congrats on that great achievement. And today, Clever Girl Finance is one of the largest personal finance media education platform for women in the United States. Also, you may have seen Bola or heard about Clever Girl Finance because they've been featured in so many media, including Time.com, Money Magazine, CNBC, Forbes, Fast Company, Essence, Black Enterprise, Chatter TV, ABC News, Good Morning America, BBC, Fox Business, and the Chicago Tribune. So really, really exciting to have you here with us today at Meetup Live.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. I'm super excited to have this conversation and share some tips and knowledge with everyone who's taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. And let's get right into it. And my first question for you is kind of to set the ground and just for people to understand, what would you say is the foundation for personal finance?
So I would say the foundation for personal finance is really adjusting your mindset to be focused on being able to achieve your goals, right? Your financial goals. And it's believing that despite not knowing all the answers, right, to getting to your end goal, that you can achieve it if you are intentional. So the first foundational aspect of personal finance is really adjusting your mindset to believe that you can succeed and to open your mind up to opportunities that will help you succeed. The second foundational aspect is really having a plan that you not only create, but you take action on that will allow you to achieve those goals. And this plan is essentially you telling your money what to do for you. And that plan starts with your budget.
Awesome. Awesome. And I imagine a lot of people here are joining, they want to really get into finances and really understand their personal finances. And so what would you say is a good way to get started by, you mentioned a budget. So how do you get started in getting to that budget and to follow it?
Yeah, so when it comes to getting started with creating a budget, the first thing you have to do is go easy on yourself and drop the idea of perfection. The whole idea of budgeting is not so that you have a perfect plan. It's so that you can track your money, so that you, as the boss of your money, you're telling your dollars what to do for you in the company of you, right? So you're going to have some dollars. Let's say you're the CEO of the company called you. You're going to have some dollars that work in savings, in investments, in debt payoff, in, different aspects of your life, taking care of your family, building generational wealth, going on vacation. You have all these employees that are your dollars that work in all these different departments. And so it's about giving yourself the grace to be able to adjust as things change, as life happens, as your income changes, so that you're able to, leverage that budget to help you succeed with your financial plans. When you're thinking about budgeting, it's also about finding the budgeting method that works for you. So a lot of financial advice out there will tell you that this is the best budgeting method, that is the best budgeting method, but the best budgeting approach, the best budgeting method is the one that works for you. And the one that works for you is the one that you actively use. So you might decide to start budgeting with a spreadsheet, with a pen and paper, with an app, with a hybrid of the two. You may choose to budget with percentage-based method. You may choose to budget with a 70-30 percentage method. It's all up to you and what works best for you. And it's also important that as you're creating your budget, you check in every day, frequently. And at the end of the month, you assess the budget for the prior month to see how well it went, what didn't go well, what do you need to adjust for the next month, what planned expenses, one-time expenses do you know are coming up, and make sure that you're building your goals into your budget, because your budget is not just about spending money. It's also about telling some of your money, like I mentioned earlier, to go towards investments, go towards savings, go towards your dream goals. So you want to fit those categories for your dreams and your investments and your savings, etc., into your budget as well.
Awesome. And I really like this idea of kind of iterating and trying and kind of adjusting to your needs. And so to that end, really, to keep your finances is going to be an ongoing work. So can you share some ways to stay organized, knowing that it's not a one-time deal? It's something you're going to have to do every week or every month.
Yeah, so staying organized with your finances, first of all, means that you need to get a sense of the big picture of your finances, right? What are all your bills? Have you recently checked your credit reports? What are your passwords to your bank accounts? All this information that you want to have aggregated into one place. It could be a secure spreadsheet or in your notes app on your phone that you lock with a password. You just want to have this information handy. And then you want to build those bill payments into your calendar. What are the things that you have to pay for? Set the reminders in your calendar using your, if you use Gmail or Yahoo, or using your phone's calendar, so that you get those reminders and you don't pay your bills late. And it's also about simplifying the process, right? So let's say you have bills that are due on several different days of the month. What you can do is call your service providers, call your lenders, and ask them to move your bill due dates. And many of them will oblige, as long as you're not moving the bill due date more than 30 days beyond when the bill is due. So you're able to put your bills and pay them. Let's say if you get paid once a month or twice a month, you can organize your bill due dates around when you're getting paid. So think about how to simplify your finances so you don't feel overwhelmed. And that means easy access to your information, knowing where your information is. It means simplicity in paying your bills. It also means asking for help if you need help. So if you're behind on a bill, pick up your phone, call your creditor. It also means getting educated about personal finance, which is primarily what we offer at Clever Girl Finance with our free courses. So getting organized, it's like organizing your closet, right? You pull everything out and you create a big mess, but then you start to put things back in order as you declutter and as you fine tune your wardrobe. And the same applies to your finances.
Love that analogy. We went through my closet, so I can definitely picture that. And I don't know if you're someone like me who wants to do everything, and I want to have a budget, but I don't want to sacrifice some things that make me happy. What advice do you have?
I love that question. And I think it's important to discuss because the idea of budgeting makes some people feel apprehensive because they think it's like a punishment. They think it's like restriction. But just to remind you, your budget is you telling your money what to do. You are the boss. And it's also very important that you give yourself the opportunity to enjoy your life as you're living your life, because at the end of the day, life is not just about money. So you want to build in those simple pleasures, those simple enjoyments within reason into your budget, so that as you're saving, as you're paying down debt, as you're pursuing your other financial goals, you don't start to feel like all you're doing is living to pay bills or to save money, because what happens when you start feeling like that is that you end up giving up on your financial goals. You end up not being as motivated to pursue them because there's no incentive, right? So it's important to create a line item in your budget for the things that bring you happiness. It could be having a line item that's tied to a dedicated bank account where you save for travel, you save for shopping, you save for going out to eat with your friends, you save for whatever it is, your daily coffee. And every time you get paid, as you organize your money across all your other categories in your budget, some of that money will go into that special account that is guilt-free for you to do as you please while you continue to pursue your goals. So people ask me, what if I'm paying off debt? Does it make sense for me to have a happiness account? It absolutely does, because as you make strides with paying off your debt, you want to be motivated to continue, right? So if you make a $500 payment to your debt this month, it's okay to put $10 into that happiness account that's going to help you buy something or do something that's going to make you stay motivated towards paying off your debt.
I'm definitely starting a happiness account. I love this, this concept. I love it. And you touch a little bit about kind of, the amounts, like your happiness and the other things. So to you, is there like a magic ratio for how much a person should be saving, investing, and actually spending?
So that's another great question. And it really depends on your goals and how quickly you want to achieve your goal, right? So let's use retirement as an example. You might be 30 years old and you want to retire at age 65. You love your job, you love the work you do, and you have your investment plans churning along for the next 35 years. So you likely, may be saving 10%, 15% of your income towards retirement, for example. But let's say you're someone else who is 30 years old and you want to retire when you are 40. You don't want to work anymore. You want to move to a different country. You want to live a more relaxed life. Then you might need to save a lot more or invest a lot more. So you might be investing 20, 30, even 40% of your income or more to accelerate that goal of retirement. So the amount of money you should be saving, investing, and actually spending depends on your goals. Like, what are you trying to achieve eventually with your savings? How soon do you need the money? But I would say at a very minimum, if you have a consistent and steady income, you want to try to save/invest at least 10% of your income, and then figure out the rest of your expenses on the other 90%, right? And that would include paying down debt. So it's just something to think about. If you, however, have really aggressive debt payoff goals and you want to get out of debt as quickly as possible, you may decide, I want to save only 5%, and I'm going to put as much extra outside of my core expenses towards paying off debt. But I will say, a common question I get asked is, can I save money and can I pay off debt at the same time? And the answer is yes. And the answer is also that you should, because we live in uncertain economic times right now. And the last thing you want to do is go through a financial downturn and then have to get into more debt to get out of the situation. You want to have emergency savings put aside, and you also want to be saving for your future self, for your retirement, even if it's a small amount. So I would say at the very least, aim to put aside 5% towards savings and investments, and then aggressively focus on paying down your debt with the rest of whatever you can spare from the rest of your 95%.
So you've been talking, you've been alluding to debt a lot. And so I'd like to get more into that. So, when you say being more kind of aggressive on paying debt, what are the most strategic way to pay off debt?
Yeah, so when it comes to debt, right, what keeps people stuck in debt is never the principal balance. The principal balance is what it is. If you owe $10,000 and not a dot of interest is charged on it, every time you make a payment, that principal balance is going to go down. The $10,000 will go down. The trouble with debt is that that's rarely the case because of interest, and not just interest, compounding interest. So interest compounds, and depending on the type of debt that you have, your interest might be compounding daily, bi-weekly, monthly. There's so many different variations depending on your creditor. And when that debt is compounding, it's compounding on your principal balance, which is why a lot of people will make minimum payments and they will see their debt balances grow, because every time you make a minimum payment, which is the least amount of money you're required to pay, your interest then compounds on your existing principal balance, adding more money on top of your debt. And the next month it compounds again on the more money that was added onto your debt. So it's all about strategic ways to pay off debt. And there are two main ways to pay off debt strategically. You take all of your debts, you prioritize them either by interest rate, right? What debt is costing you the most? And that is a debt with the highest interest rate. Or you categorize them by smallest balance. When you categorize by smallest balance, those are easy wins because you can pay off the smallest balance faster and you can stay motivated to pursue your debt payoff plan. And what you want to do, depending on these two categorizations, is either you choose that debt that has the highest interest rate and focus on paying the minimum payment, but as much more than the minimum as you can afford on that number one priority debt. And then you make your minimum payments to all the others. Once that number one priority debt is gone, you take all that money plus the extra money, the minimum payment you were putting to that number one debt, and then you now apply it to your number two debt while making the minimum payments on your other debts. And the reason why you do it this way, so that if you can pay more than the minimum on your most expensive debt, you automatically are bringing down your principal balance, which means the next time interest compounds on that debt, it's compounding on a lower amount. And this is how you get out of debt. You can apply the same approach to prioritizing your smallest balance debt and just paying as much as you can in excess of the minimum to that smallest balance debt. And that same approach will help you, get out of that debt faster. You want to think about interest like this. Imagine that you have a hole in the ground and you need to fill it up. And there's a pile of sand and you have a spoon. And you're using your spoon to put in the sand into the hole. Those are your minimum payments. But there is an automatic shovel, which is interest, that is this big. And for every spoonful you put in, it digs out a big chunk, right? So your goal is to get a shovel and put more sand in than the automatic shovel, the interest, can dig out.
Love it. Yeah, that sounds like a really great different methods as well. So thank you for sharing those. And you did kind of answer this question, but I just more specifically, you did say that it makes sense to save for retirement and to kind of pay off debt. And so does it make sense if you have a credit card debt? Because we did mention it's kind of really high interest. So does it make sense to still kind of save for retirement if you have really high, high interest debts?
Yeah, so the reason why I say it's important to save for retirement is that, for example, here in the US, for my generation of people younger than me, Social Security is likely going to be non-existent, right? And that essentially, and I'm sure in many countries where government benefits do not exist, it essentially means that the only person who's creating a retirement plan for you is yourself. Right? In the US, you might end up in a government-funded home, housing, getting benefits checks that really don't cover anything. And even with our existing benefits, my mom is retired and she gets a $700 Social Security check, and that cannot even pay her mortgage, right? Or her rent for wherever she lives. So there's no one creating a plan for you. There's no one that's going to say when you turn 65, listen, while you've been living your life, I've been here building you this mansion on the beach, and here's a bottle of champagne, and let's celebrate your retirement. Nobody's doing it for you. And so the reason why it's important to save is because you don't want to miss the opportunity. You don't want to have that opportunity cost, right? Even if you're only saving a small amount of money, 1%, 2% of your income, you're taking advantage of time. And that time ties into the ability of your money to appreciate, to compound, and to earn dividends. However, if you have high interest debt, it can be counterintuitive to say, well, why should I be investing when I can pay off this debt? And that's why you have to be strategic, right? So you say, okay, I have debt, so I cannot save 20% of my income, but I can save 3%, I can save 5%. And with the difference, the other 15%, I'm going to strategically use the debt payment methods I described to tackle that debt and see what other opportunities I have to cut back on my expenses or increase my income through side hustles, part-time jobs, better paying job, so that I can then put more money towards this debt, but knowing I have that small 3 to 5% saving for me. Once you've got a handle on that debt, you've paid off that credit card, then you can get more aggressive with investing more and saving more for your future self. But because there's nobody out there, unless you have a trust fund, because there's nobody out there that's creating a plan for your future self, it's important that you have something small, you know, in the background while you focus on tackling your debt.
That makes a lot of sense. Just that cushion to make sure that we have a good future ahead of us.
Yes.
I've heard before this concept of good debt and bad debt. Is there a difference? Is that true? Can you enlighten me on what is that concept of good and bad debt?
Well, I believe that debt is debt, right? I don't know what is good about owing somebody else money. However, there is debt that is better than others. And this is debt that you can leverage towards asset building, for example. So for example, when you take out a mortgage to purchase a property or a piece of real estate that has the potential to appreciate or has the potential to create positive cash flow, that's when you're leveraging other people's money, AKA better debt, to build wealth and assets for yourself. So that's a great example. Another great example of better debt is, that if you take on a student loan to get educated, to get a job that's going to help you generate income across your lifetime, right? That's better debt. Bad debt is debt that is not associated to any assets and is no longer tangible. So whatever you took the money out for that debt, whatever you took that debt out for has long been gone. The coffee is gone. The vacation is gone. The dress is ruined. It's too small, it's too big. And all you're left with is the bill associated to high interest. That's a debt we want to avoid. The store cards, the credit cards, paying for vacations, paying for dinners on credit card without a way to pay it at the end of the month. That's the type of debt we want to avoid. That is the bad debt.
All right, well, at least I feel better about my student debt. There's some good in that.
Yeah, there is some good in that.
And we talked a little bit about we talked a lot about retirement. And I also, we hear a lot when planning about the concept of emergency fund, which is different, right? So it's saving, but it's a different type. Can you share more about the strategy around that concept of having an emergency fund?
Yes. So an emergency fund, some people don't like the name because they're like, well, does that mean I'm going to have an emergency? It is, call it a backup fund, call it an unplanned life situations fund, whatever you want to call it. It's something you need to have. It is essentially a buffer, right? That when life happens, you can tap into it without having to leverage debt. And sometimes people are not even able to leverage debt because they don't have the credit when life situations happen. So it's important to have this emergency fund. We all lived through this crazy pandemic. We're continuing to live through it. And we've all seen firsthand the importance of having an emergency fund. Life happens, people fall ill, people lose jobs, people's income become inconsistent, right? Those are big life situations. But there's other situations where your water heater might break, right? And that's not an expense you had in your budget. You may get a flat tire. You may need to buy an emergency plane ticket to go see a family member in a different state or a different country. This is why you want to have those savings that you can tap into that are not associated to, to any debt or being able to qualify for debts that you can use to get through this unplanned life situation. And then once you get through it, you start to recover. And so when it comes to how much you should have, I recommend 3 to 6 months of your savings in emergency savings. However, when I say 3 to 6 months, I'm referring to your core living expenses, because people hear that number and they get scared. And like, there's no way I can save 6 months of my salary. It's about saving 6 months of your core living expenses. This is your food. This is your transportation. This is safe housing. This is any medicines you might need. This is paying for core utilities like water, electricity, internet to find a new job. And when you take that amount out of all the other things you pay for, like the Netflix and getting your hair done and the dinners and all that stuff, it is a much smaller and manageable amount. And what you need to do is create a line item in your budget that says emergency savings. Every time you get paid, you designate an amount from your income towards this savings account. And your goal is that 3 to 6 months. When you get to 3 to 6 months of savings, right, you leave the money alone. You can repurpose the line item in your budget into somewhere else. Or if you have to use the money before the 3 to 6 months, has been saved, you use it, and then you build it back into your budget to replenish it, because that's what the money is there for. It's there to help you cover unplanned life situations.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. Really, really useful. My other question for you is, we know that credit rating is really important. And so can you share some tips on how we can improve our credit rating?
Yes. So one thing to keep in mind, though, is the word credit sounds enticing, and people are like, I want to have good credit. And they end up doing crazy things to have good credit, like opening store cards and getting into debt. Credit, there is no prize for it. Credit is really your ability to take on debt. It is your debt responsibility rating, right? And the thing to keep in mind is that if you have money, you have cash, you really don't need credit, right? So, but credit is useful because in today's world, many establishments do not take cash anymore. So you need to have a credit card to pay. Credit cards offer protections, from identity theft, et cetera, from fraud. Employers check credit, landlords check credit. To get a cell phone or a service utility, many of these service providers will check your credit. So to improve your credit, maintain your credit, number one, pay your bills on time. Do not open cards for things that are not associated to assets. Don't get involved in high credit cards, high interest credit cards. If you do use a credit card, right, make sure you're paying off your balance in full. So you're building your spending into your budget. You're spending on eating out and you're going to use your credit card to pay, then build how much you can spend eating out into your budget so that when that credit card bill comes at the end of the month, you can pay it because you plan for it. Monitor your credit. Many banks now offer, or many banks and credit cards offer free credit scores, credit monitoring services, and then make sure you check your credit at least once a year. So here in the US, at least 1 in 3 credit reports has an error. And I think this also applies in the UK as well. And the error can be as simple as a wrong address or a misspelled name, to as serious as an extra zero on the balance or even accounts that you don't know about. So it's important to check your credit. And then if you have any issues, dispute it and put it in writing to the credit bureaus and to whoever reported the amount or issue.
Great. That was really, really important information around credit rates. And so I think we're going to transition. We have so many great questions from people coming in. So I'm going to start sharing with you some of those questions. The first one is from Dave. And the question goes, what are some recommendations on helping folks, he said particularly family member, to understand that having a budget does not mean that you're broke?
You don't have to help them understand anything, right? This is you focusing on your finances. So as opposed to them thinking you're broke, tell them that you have goals. You have life goals. That's why you're saving and investing, not because you're broke, because you have goals.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. Chris Coyle asks on the happiness account, my favorite account. So he's asking what percentage should go into that account. And I know you shared a little bit that it depends, but you have like kind of a range in which, you would recommend keep that.
It depends on your situation, right? Are you paying off debt? And when you think about how much you want to put into the account, does it sound reasonable, right? So if you have $10,000 in debt, it's not reasonable to put $1,000 a month into a happy account. Maybe you put in $50 a month. So it really depends on your situation, as long as it sounds reasonable, right? And it also depends on your income. So look at the amount, see what you can afford, and determine if it sounds reasonable to you.
Makes sense. A lot of sense. Hopefully it's a big enough happy account that you can have a good meal. That would be my number one line. Okay, another question from Efe. If I have debt, can I still invest while paying it down, or should I pay off my debt completely first? So we talked a little bit about that. So she says that the idea being that losing money debt interest, which is often higher than any returns they can get from investing, especially in a down market. So what would you recommend?
So I would say you can still invest while paying down debt, but the investment that you want to consider is long-term saving for retirement and taking advantage of any employer retirement savings plans and matches that your employer might have. And then outside of that, focus on paying down your debt. Yes, sometimes the interest rates on debt can far outweigh the short-term returns in the stock market, but you're thinking long-term when you're investing this small amount. So I would say, around 5% of your income, you can save and invest, right, for your future self, and then just focus on getting out of debt. If your employer offers a plan and they have a match, invest enough or contribute enough to get that full match, because that is free money that outweighs your credit card interest. But then really focus on paying down your debt and just have a little bit of money going towards your future self. Like I said, no one out here is creating a plan for you, and you want to take advantage of the power of time so that you can achieve the benefits of compounding, appreciation, and dividends.
Great advice. Okay, we have a question from, actually this one is anonymous, but the person says that they have funds to invest, but not a good monthly cash flow. What do you recommend for dividend interest investments?
So I'm not a financial advisor. I can't give you specific investment advice, but I would say if you do not have good monthly cash flow, then that means your income is inconsistent, which means before you consider investing, it's very important that you have a cash buffer that can help you pay your bills consistently, right? If your income is not coming in consistently. Once you have that buffer in place, 3 to 6 months, then you might want to look at investing. I'm a huge fan of investing passively in index funds, especially if you are new to investing. And outside of the stock market, there's other ways to invest, which are more high risk and more capital intensive, but there are also options to research like real estate, like investing in business. There's different avenues in real estate, residential, commercial, hospitality, farmland, so many options. And even now, much higher risk, but is also trending, is investing in digital assets as well.
Absolutely. And a question from Chris that's kind of tied to investments. So he's asking, what percentage of return per year is realistic for investment?
I cannot tell you what's realistic because I can't predict the future. But historically, right, the average return since the inception of the US stock market has been about 10% before inflation. After inflation, that's been about 8%. And that beats any savings account hands down, which is, here in the US, I think the average savings is like 0.02% interest rate return. And so keep in mind that with that 10% before inflation, that is the average. So depending on how you invest, there are people who have seen gains, in double digits investing in the stock market long term. So I would say do your research, right? Look at the historical performance of the investments you're considering, and make sure you have a cash buffer in place so that while the market is doing what the market does, it goes through ups and downs. And right now we're sort of in a down situation. And while the market is doing what it does, you have cash and income to live your life without having to tap into your investments and prematurely impact its opportunity for growth.
So switching from investment back to debts, we talk about, some debts being good. So Fred is asking, is it better to avoid all kinds of debt altogether?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't need to, why take on the debt, right? If you don't need the debt, why take it on? Just build your investments and your assets. So I know for a lot of people, buying a home is a debt that they take on because not many people have hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy a house in cash. And not many people want to tie up that large amount of money at a low interest rate when they could be investing, for example, in the stock market and getting a higher rate of return on their investment. So, things like real estate, purchasing a home, low interest rate things, it might make sense to take on that debt and create a plan to pay it off. But if you don't feel comfortable about it, then avoid the debt altogether. You don't need to leverage debt, then don't do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I hope I pronounced this name right. Piata is asking, how much should I contribute right now to a 401k versus putting money away to savings?
So savings, one thing to keep in mind about savings is that unless you need the money in the short term, within the next 5 years, you actually don't want to keep it in cash. And this is because of inflation. In the US, as a result of the pandemic, our inflation rate is somewhere around 7%, right? That's a lot of money. Prior to the pandemic, the average inflation is about 2 to 2.5%. So banks are not giving anybody 2%. Banks are in the 0.0 percentage, right? So the longer you have cash in a savings account, the less it's worth every year. If you need the money short term, you're saving to buy a house, you're saving for a business, you're saving for something short term, you want to have access to that money when you need it. But for the long term, you want to be investing. So I would say in cash, have your emergency savings and have your short term goal money. And then in a 401k, if you are able to max out in the US, the contribution limit is $20,500 for 2022. Aim at maxing that out. If not, determine if your employer has a match and contribute enough to get your employer's match. You can also, in addition to your 401k, open up your own traditional or Roth IRA, which you can contribute, I believe, up to $6,000 for 2022 in the US. And if you can max that out, max that out. And then outside of the retirement vehicles, you can open up your own brokerage account with a brokerage firm like Vanguard, Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, and start to invest there. So I would say investing trumps savings, because investing is your money going to work for you and pursuing compounding, dividends, and appreciation. But you need to have that cash in place for short-term emergencies for your short-term goals.
Great. So another question here from Gustavo. Can you talk about strategies for creating passive income through dividend payouts as a way to diversify income revenues, and to share some pros and cons to this approach?
So in order to create passive income, you're going to have, you need money to create this money, right? So the most common way of creating passive income is by investing in the stock market, in stocks or funds that are focused on dividends, right? So, as the value and the companies grow, they have high dividend payments. That's one way. The other way is through business or side hustles, where you spend the time and you create an asset or a product, and this asset is out there for sale and people buy it and you earn passive revenue from it. So for example, you may spend 6 months writing a book, right? And you put the book on Amazon or you get published and the work has been done. And now it's a passive form of revenue because that book is an evergreen forever product. And when people buy it, you have money coming in. The same applies to things like courses. Where you leverage a skill set, you teach a course, you create a course, and then you sell this course, and this course starts to generate revenue without you actively having to repeat the initial work you put in to create the courses. So there are different ideas for passive income. We actually have an article on Clever Girl Finance that you can go and search on our blog. Just search passive income to get more ideas.
Love it. We're gonna have to check that blog post. Okay, a question about buying an apartment. So you did talk a little bit about the concept of buying a home. So buying an apartment with mostly cash now, or still taking a loan. What would you recommend?
Well, mostly cash sounds like they're going to need to take a loan, right? So it depends on the interest rate. In the US, our housing market is crazy because interest rates are so ridiculously low. So I would say, depending on where you are, if you're looking at a 2% mortgage, I would take the loan, put the money down that's required to avoid any private mortgage insurance, take the loan and then invest the difference. And then once I've taken the loan, create a plan to pay more than the minimum on the mortgage if you want to pay that off. But it really depends on the associated interest rates in terms of taking a loan associated to this apartment. And the only reason why I recommend this is because the apartment is a potential asset, right? That can either increase in value through appreciation, or if it eventually becomes a rental property, can potentially, depending, again, do your research, can create positive cash flow for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have another question going back to retirement. So if you can have a 401k and a traditional IRA at the same time, is it possible?
Yes, that's a US. Those are US investment vehicles. And yes, you can have a 401k and you can have an IRA as well.
Awesome. Great. Okay, someone here who's 24 years old is wondering, do you think they should get life insurance?
So that answer depends. At the very least, and I don't mean to sound morbid, you don't want to create a financial burden for the people you leave behind. So God forbid something happens to you, you want to be able to bury yourself. If you have dependents, you want to be able to leave something that leaves them accustomed to the lifestyle they have when you were here. So I would say, yes, life insurances are also much, much cheaper when you are younger, and as you get older, it becomes more expensive. So if you can establish your policy now into the future, that makes sense. But I will also say that don't rely on life insurance as your plan. Invest your money, put your money to work for you. You're young, you're healthy. That should be your focus.
Great. Okay. So a question here just on the retirement again. So Nelly Menso asks, if you max out your ROTH RRA, so that's again, it's
your Roth IRA, yes.
Yeah. So should all the money be invested in index funds? So invested in general?
So I'm not a financial advisor. I cannot tell you where to invest your money, but index funds are a great place to consider putting your money because they offer broad diversification, and broad diversification helps to minimize your overall risk.
Awesome. Okay. So we have time for one more, and I think this question would kind of as a last question. So what good apps can we use to track budget and expenses? Any tips for adhering to the budget? Because the person say in their case, expenses always overshoots the budget. So basically any good app to get that person stay on track.
Yeah, expenses always come and mess things up, right? So, there are so many great apps. I would say it's less about the app and more about you consistently using the app. So I always tell people when they ask for app recommendations, go into your smartphone and type in budgeting apps and download the first 5 that come up, 5 to 10 that come up. Open them up and test them. Is it easy to connect to your bank accounts? Do you like the colors? Is it difficult to navigate? That's your elimination method until you land on the app that you enjoy using and you're happy to open it, as opposed to like, oh my God, this is going to be too much trouble. A really popular app is mint.com. Mint in the App Store. There's also an app called You Need a Budget, but there's so many different ones. It's all about finding the app that appeals to you and your lifestyle the most, that you're actually going to click on every day, that's going to connect to your bank accounts without frustrating you.
That's a very good tip. And I love that idea of kind of going in and testing the different options. All right, just on the final notes from you, Bola, before we kind of close the conversation, what are some of your favorite tips for staying on top of your finances?
Yeah, so I'm always trying to stay on top of my finances, which means immersing myself in all things finance. I love to read finance blogs. For anyone who's starting their journey, just staying on top of your financial education, checking out personal finance books. Clever Girl Finance has a whole book series available everywhere books are sold. And also automating my finances. And automation just helps me make sure that I save and I invest. When I say I'm going to do it, the money never hits my bank account. So I never have the opportunity to have the mental battles with myself as to, oh, I'll save later, I invest later. It goes straight to the investment account, goes straight to the savings account. So automation can help you save more money.
I love that. Don't tempt yourself from getting off track, basically. All right. Well, thank you, Bola, for all those great tips. I learned so much today. I really appreciate all that you shared with us. And thank you everyone for joining. There were so many of you who joined us today, who asked amazing questions. So I am really so happy to have you all. And I hope you learned just as much as I did. And before we go, I just want to share a few slides. So speaking of staying educated, Bola wrote this awesome book, Choose to Prosper. So you have the information here. So go get a copy and stay educated about your finances. You can also, if you want to start your own meetup group around finance, we have some savings for you here if you want to start your subscription. So great way of staying, on track is also to share and to have other people to stay accountable. And finally, just want to share that we have a podcast called Keep Connected, where our CEO, David Siegel, speak with amazing thought leaders in the community space. So we have the scan available here if you want to subscribe and listen to us. So as a final reminder, you're going to be able to watch this recorded of this event and also read a recap of the event in a few days on our blog at meetup.com/blog. Thanks again, everyone, and stay safe. See you.
Bye.